You know what's strange when you stop and think about it? You might already be completely healed from something that once broke you, and you don't even realize it yet. Sit with that thought for a moment. You could be there convinced you're still damaged, still struggling with the same old pain, still carrying the same wounds. Meanwhile, your psyche has been quietly doing its work, silently, invisibly, rebuilding you from the inside out while you weren't even paying attention. I understood something most therapists overlook. Healing doesn't arrive with grand announcements or fireworks. It doesn't send you a message saying, "Congratulations, you're all better now." No, real healing is subtle. It's the psychological version of how a tree grows. You don't see it happen day by day, but one day you suddenly realize, wait, when did I become this strong? That's what I want to show you right now. You've healed far more than you think, and I'm going to help you see it. But here's the twist. This isn't one of those overly positive talks that insists everything is perfect when it isn't. This is about something much deeper, something that took me a lifetime to study and understand. The process I called individuation, the journey from inner chaos to inner unity, from being fragmented to becoming whole. And if you follow this thought, I'll walk you through 7 clear signs that this process has already been happening within you. 7 indicators that prove your psyche has been doing its healing work, even while your conscious mind still believed it was broken. Because here's the thing no one really tells you, your consciousness is always the last one to notice. Let's start with what most of us get wrong. Most people believe healing is a straight line. You get hurt, you do the work, you get better. Point A to point B, damage to recovery, wound to scar. But that's not how the mind works. The human psyche isn't a machine you can fix with the right tools. It's more like a living ecosystem, layered and complex, full of hidden processes happening beneath the surface. Have you ever noticed that you can't remember the exact moment you stopped being afraid of something? Maybe you were terrified of speaking in public for years, and then one day someone asks you to give a talk, and you just do it. No panic, no shaking, no spiraling anxiety beforehand. When did that change happen? You can't point to it, it just did. That's what true healing looks like. It's not loud or dramatic. It doesn't come with angels or a sudden burst of light. It's quieter than that, gentler, almost sneaky in how it transforms you. And this matters more than you might think. Because if you don't know what real healing looks like, you'll miss it when it happens. You'll keep believing you're broken long after you've already mended. You'll keep searching for a transformation that already took place. I see this all the time. People who've done years of therapy, years of reflection, years of facing their pain and doing inner work still describe themselves as not there yet. They still call themselves works in progress, as if the healing hasn't happened. But if you actually look at their lives, their habits, their relationships, their emotional patterns, they're completely different from who they were 5 years ago. The evidence is all around them, but they can't see it because they're searching for the wrong signs. So that's what we're going to change right now. I'm going to give you a new way to recognize the marks of deep inner healing, based on how the psyche truly transforms, not how we think it should. By the time we're done, you'll see yourself in a new light. You'll recognize progress you didn't know you'd made. You'll start giving yourself credit for the growth you've been quietly achieving all along. But first, we need to understand what healing really means. This is where my ideas began to differ from most others. Here's where it became controversial. Most therapies, self-help movements, and spiritual systems all share the same hidden belief that healing means becoming better, becoming pure, virtuous kind, eliminating all your flaws and becoming the ideal version of yourself. Get rid of your anger, overcome your selfishness, transcend your envy, become enlightened. Become the best you. And I said no, that's not healing, that's repression wearing a spiritual mask. Because here's what happens when you try to become good. When you try to eliminate everything about yourself that you think is bad or shameful, you don't get rid of it. You just bury it in what I called the shadow, the part of the unconscious where all our rejected parts go to live. And the shadow doesn't just sit there quietly. It grows, it becomes stronger, darker, more reactive the more you ignore it. Think about the most judgmental people you know, the ones always calling others out, obsessed with moral failures and pointing fingers. What are they really doing? They're projecting their own shadows. They're seeing in others what they can't face in themselves. The angry person who hates aggression, the sexually repressed person who constantly comments on others' behavior, the greedy one who calls everyone else materialistic. That's the shadow acting out. So I proposed something different, something radical for its time. I said, you don't heal by becoming good. You heal by becoming whole, by integrating everything light and dark, kind and cruel, generous and selfish, angel and demon. I once said, I'd rather be whole than good. Let that settle in for a moment. I'd rather be whole than good. That doesn't mean giving yourself permission to hurt others or to act without conscience. It means something far more profound. It means recognizing that every human being contains contradictions. Every psyche holds darkness as well as light, impulses we wish we didn't have, desires we were told were wrong. True healing, real psychological health, comes from embracing all of that, from acknowledging and integrating every part into awareness. That's what individuation is, the process of becoming who you truly are, not who you think you're supposed to be. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's not something you can check off a list. It's a lifelong unfolding. But there are clear markers along the way. Signs that tell you you're moving forward, that the work is happening inside you even when you can't see it. Those signs aren't achievements or goals. They're natural side effects of the psyche doing its job. So let's talk about one of them. You've healed more than you think when you can be alone without feeling lonely. That might sound simple, maybe too simple, but it's actually profound. Most people are terrified of being alone, not for an hour or two, but truly alone. No phone, no book, no music, no distractions. Just you and your thoughts in a silent room. Try it sometime, see what happens. Within minutes your hand reaches for something to distract you. Your mind starts racing, listing things you need to do. Anything to avoid being with yourself. We fill our lives with constant noise for a reason, because what's inside can be unsettling. The thoughts we don't want to face, the emotions we've been suppressing, the memories we'd rather forget. But here's what changes when you start to heal. You can finally sit with yourself. You can be in that quiet room and feel at peace. Not ecstatic, not blissful, just calm, just okay. Why? Because you've done something rare. You've met yourself, the real you. Not the mask you show the world, not the person you wish you were, but your actual self, flaws and all. The parts you used to hide, your anger, jealousy, resentment, your petty thoughts, your uncomfortable desires. You've looked at them honestly. You've said, this is me too. That's integration. That's shadow work. And when you do that, those parts stop controlling you. Because the pieces of yourself you reject don't disappear. They go underground. They form what I called autonomous complexes, little fragments of personality that can hijack your behavior when you're not aware. Ever lost your temper over something small and thought, why did I do that? That's not like me. That's a complex taking over. That's your shadow acting out. But when you bring those hidden parts into awareness, when you stop running from them and start understanding them, they lose their grip. They stop running the show. They become simply parts of you, not good, not bad, just human. And that's when solitude becomes possible, because you're no longer afraid of what you'll discover when you're alone. You've already met your demons. You've sat with them, listened to them, made peace with them. They're not strangers anymore. You become your own friend, your own steady companion. And that, truly, is one of the deepest signs of healing there is. If you can sit quietly with yourself for an hour and feel at peace, not needing distraction, not craving escape, you've healed more than you realize. Sign number 2, when the past loses its grip. The second sign, your old triggers don't trigger you the same way anymore. Let me draw you a picture. There used to be something that completely shattered you. Maybe it was a certain tone of voice, maybe being criticized, maybe feeling unseen, ignored, or undervalued. Maybe it was watching someone succeed where you had once failed. Whatever it was, whenever it happened, boom, you'd spiral. Hours, days, sometimes even weeks of emotional chaos, endless thoughts, self-doubt, frustration, that awful feeling in your gut that just wouldn't fade away. It had control over you, total control. But then something shifts, and you don't even realize it right away. The same situation happens again. The same trigger shows up, and you feel something, maybe a tiny twinge, maybe a short wave of discomfort. But it doesn't consume you. It doesn't pull you under. You notice it. You observe it. You think, interesting. And then you move on. What changed? I'd say you made the unconscious conscious. You brought the hidden wound into the light, processed it, digested it, and integrated it. Triggers are basically emotional landmines, buried remains of old pain, past experiences that were too heavy to handle at the time, so they got pushed down deep into the unconscious. And there they stayed, buried, until something in your current life reminds your mind of that original hurt. Then boom, the mind explodes. You're not reacting to what's actually happening in this moment. You're reacting to what happened then. This is why your reactions sometimes feel too big for the situation. Your partner forgets to text you back, and suddenly you feel this massive wave of abandonment. Your boss gives you feedback and you feel attacked. Someone disagrees with you, and it feels like your whole identity is under threat. The present event touches an old wound, and the emotional intensity you feel isn't from now, it's from the past. But here's what's beautiful about healing. As you do the inner work, as you explore those wounds, trace their roots, and allow yourself to actually feel what you once buried, something profound happens. The landmines get diffused. The old wounds still exist. Healing doesn't delete your past, but they lose their destructive power. They're integrated. They've been brought out of the unconscious and into awareness. They become part of your story instead of forces secretly directing your story. Now you can look at them clearly. You can say, "Oh, that's why I reacted that way. That reminds me of when I was 8, and my dad said this." Or, "That touches the same spot as when my former partner said that." You can see the link. You can understand the pattern, and in that awareness, the trigger loses most of its strength. It's like the difference between being haunted by a ghost and learning the story of the house. Same facts, totally different emotional experience. This is huge. It's one of the clearest signs that deep healing has taken place, and many people miss it because they're not paying attention. You stop reacting the way you used to, and instead of celebrating that progress, you barely notice it. It just feels ordinary. Like, of course I'm not crushed by criticism anymore. I'm an adult. But no, that took time. That took healing. That took your mind and working long hours behind the scenes, integrating that pain. Give yourself credit for that. Acknowledge it as a real marker of growth, because when the past loses its bite, when your triggers stop triggering you, that's not numbness, that's not avoidance, that's integration. That's wholeness. Then comes the next sign, the paradox playground. The third sign of deep healing. And this is where things get really interesting. You can hold contradictions without falling apart. Let me ask you something. Can you love someone deeply and still get frustrated by them? Can you feel grateful for your life while also noticing its challenges? Can you feel confident about your abilities while also recognizing your limits? If your answer is yes, congratulations. You've reached a place many people spend their entire lives trying to reach. You can hold paradox. Our culture hates paradox. It wants things to be one way or the other, right or wrong, good or bad, win or lose. You're either confident or insecure, happy or sad, healed or broken. We're taught that contradictions must be resolved, that we must choose a side, that we must be consistent. But life doesn't work that way, and neither does the human psyche. Carl Jung talked about this. He described something called the transcendent function, the ability to hold two opposing truths at the same time without forcing them into one answer. That's psychological maturity. That's what integration really means. Think about it. You contain multitudes. You're kind and selfish. You're brave and scared. You're wise and foolish. You love and you hate. You're strong and you're vulnerable. You're confident and insecure, all at once. When you've healed deeply, you can see and accept this without it breaking your mind, You don't need to solve the contradiction. You don't need to be only one thing. You don't need life to be simple or binary. This connects directly to the shadow, the parts of yourself you once rejected because they didn't match your ego's image of who you thought you were. You want to believe you're a good person, so you reject your selfishness. You want to see yourself as strong, so you hide your vulnerability. You want to believe you're rational, so you suppress your emotions. But healing means bringing those rejected parts back into awareness, admitting they exist, accepting that you're complex and contradictory. And here's the beautiful part. When you can do this, when you can hold opposites inside yourself, you become more real, not less. Because you're not pretending anymore. You're not putting up an exhausting mask of consistency. You're just being who you truly are, which includes contradictions. You can say, yes, I love my job, and sometimes I resent it. Both true. I'm grateful for my partner, and they annoy me sometimes. Both true. I'm proud of what I've done, and I still feel like I could do more. Both true. The need to pick one side, to always be consistent, to have the right answer all the time, starts to dissolve, and it's freeing. It's like your inner world exhales. You no longer have to pretend. You no longer have to chase perfection. You can just exist in your full complexity. This idea connects to what Carl Rogers and many others talked about, authenticity and congruence. While Rogers came at it from a different direction, both he and Jung saw that real psychological health comes from accepting and integrating all parts of yourself, instead of denying the ones that don't fit your ideal self-image. Jung called this the union of opposites, the understanding that transformation doesn't come from destroying one side of a polarity, but from holding both sides in creative balance, light and dark, strength and weakness, joy and sadness, success and failure. You need both. You are both. And when you can accept that truth, when you can live inside that tension without needing to fix it, you've reached something profound. If you can hold contradictions that used to tear you apart, that's evidence of deep healing. That's your psyche quietly telling you you've integrated more than you realize. Then there's another sign, projection immunity. Another quiet but powerful shift, so let's look at that. What is projection? In Jungian terms, projection is seeing in others what you can't or won't see in yourself. When a part of your psyche is still unintegrated, you project it outward. You see it in other people, and then you react strongly to what you think you see. The person who's afraid of their own anger sees everyone else as aggressive. The person who denies their own neediness sees others as clingy. The person who runs from their sadness sees everyone else as miserable and tries to fix them. You're not really seeing that person. You're seeing your own shadow reflected back at you. But projection goes both ways. Other people project onto you all the time. They see in you what belongs to their own minds, not yours. They expect you to play roles that come from their past, not your present. They attribute motives, feelings, or flaws to you that actually belong to them. And when you haven't healed, when your sense of self isn't solid, you absorb those projections. You take them personally. Someone treats you like an authority, even though you're equals, and you start acting like one. Someone assumes you're weak, and suddenly you feel weak. Someone projects their anger onto you, and you start wondering if you are angry. You unconsciously become what others imagine you to be, because you don't fully know yourself yet. But with healing that changes. You develop what could be called projection immunity. Not total invincibility, you're still human, but a strong sense of self that helps you recognize when someone else is projecting onto you instead of seeing you clearly. For example, you're having a conversation, and someone becomes defensive when you ask a harmless question. They react as if you attacked them, as if you have some hidden motive. In the past, you might have absorbed that. You might have thought, oh no, did I sound harsh? Was I being mean? You'd question yourself and take on their projection. But when you're more healed, when you know yourself, you can recognize what's happening. You can think, that's their interpretation, not my intention. They're reacting to something in their own mind, not to what I actually said. You can feel compassion for them without taking responsibility for their projection. That's huge. That's how real boundaries are formed. Boundaries aren't about walls or rejection. They're about knowing where you end and another person begins. Knowing what belongs to you and what doesn't. When you can tell the difference between genuine feedback and someone else's projection, between what's truly yours and what someone's trying to hand you, you reach a kind of clarity that few people ever find. You know yourself well enough to say, "No, that's not mine," when someone tries to give you their shadow. And this doesn't make you cold or closed off. You can still be kind, you can still listen, but you're not a sponge anymore. You're not soaking up everyone's unconscious pain and carrying it around as if it's your own. You've become differentiated. You've individuated. You've learned who you are separate from what others see or say. That's healing. That's freedom. That's when your past truly loses its teeth, when contradictions no longer tear you apart, and when the projections of others no longer define you. You're not perfect, but you're whole. If you find yourself less affected by what other people think of you, less likely to take on their projections, less inclined to shape yourself according to what they expect, that's not coldness. That's not arrogance. That's healing. That's you knowing yourself deeply enough to tell the difference between what's real and what's someone else's projection. When you stop reacting to others' judgments, it's not detachment in a negative sense. It's awareness. It's self-knowledge. You're learning that your worth doesn't depend on other people's opinions. You're grounded in who you are, and that's what healing feels like. Your dreams start to change too. Some of you might think, "I don't remember my dreams," or "I don't really pay attention to them," and that's completely fine. This part may not apply to you directly, but for those who do engage with their dream life, this is one of the most revealing signs of deep inner transformation. I see dreams as direct communication from the unconscious, messages from parts of yourself that don't speak in logic or words. The dream world shows what's happening beneath conscious awareness. When you're in distress or fragmented, dreams reflect that turmoil. You may have nightmares, repeated dreams of being trapped or chased, dreams where you can't move or can't speak, dreams of falling or drowning or being lost. You wake up anxious, uneasy, shaken. These aren't random images. They're your unconscious mind trying to work through overwhelming experiences, pain, conflict, or trauma. The unconscious is basically shouting, "Something isn't right down here. Please notice." But as healing unfolds, as you integrate those lost or painful parts, your dreams begin to change. They don't suddenly turn into happy fantasies, but the tone softens. The fear loses some of its grip. You may still face challenges in your dreams, but now you have more agency. In a nightmare, you might find your voice or discover a way to protect yourself. You wake up curious instead of terrified. Recurring dreams that used to loop endlessly might shift. The setting changes or the story finds resolution. Sometimes they stop altogether. The psyche is no longer stuck. Certain images often appear in healing dreams, water, which often relates to emotion and the unconscious itself, journeys, which show psychological movement, meeting wise figures who might symbolize deeper aspects of yourself trying to speak to your conscious mind. You might dream of cleaning a house, which symbolizes organization and clearing of psychic clutter, or crossing a bridge, which means transition and change, or discovering new rooms in a familiar place, which suggest parts of yourself that were hidden are now becoming visible. These are not universal symbols with fixed meanings. What water means to me might be different from what it means to you. The key is to notice the feeling. How do you feel inside your dreams? How do you feel when you wake up? Are you less haunted, less chased by unknown threats? Is there movement or growth, even in the difficult dreams? These changes show that your unconscious is finding balance again, that parts of you once overwhelmed by pain are now integrating. Your conscious mind might still feel like it's struggling, but your dreams already know that healing is underway. The unconscious knows before you do, and it shows that through images and stories that come to you while you sleep. I spent many years studying and analyzing my own dreams and those of others. The unconscious doesn't speak in words, it speaks in symbols, images, and patterns. When the nature of those images changes, It means something inside you has reorganized. You're no longer the same person who had those terrifying dreams years ago. Your psyche has found a new structure, a more balanced shape. Healing has happened at a deep level. Another sign of transformation is when you stop fighting yourself. You've stopped waging war against your own being. You've accepted your whole self, light and dark, good and bad, everything in between. This looks like being able to admit things you once denied completely. Yes, sometimes I can be selfish. Yes, I get jealous. Yes, I have angry or aggressive feelings. Yes, I think petty thoughts. Yes, I sometimes wish bad things for people who hurt me. And when you admit these things now, you don't drown in shame. You don't think, I'm terrible. You think, that's human. This is what I meant when I spoke of finding gold in the shadow. The shadow isn't just the bad stuff. It also holds your strength, creativity, vitality. The parts of you that were hidden because they didn't fit the version of yourself you thought you were supposed to show the world. Maybe you were taught to always be nice, so your assertiveness got buried. Maybe you were told to be serious and responsible, so your playfulness was suppressed. Maybe you were told emotions are weakness, so your tenderness was pushed aside. All of that is still you, it's just been locked away. When you start doing shadow work, when you bring those parts back into the light of awareness, something unexpected happens. The very things you feared become resources. The anger becomes healthy boundaries. The selfishness becomes self-care. The aggression becomes the power to defend what matters. That's what integration is. That's what wholeness means. And something beautiful happens when you embrace all parts of yourself. You stop judging everyone else so harshly. You understand that every human being carries darkness and contradiction. Everyone has impulses they'd never admit. Everyone has thoughts that don't match their values. That doesn't make anyone evil. It makes us human. People who seem overly righteous, those who act morally superior or constantly point out others' flaws. They're usually still battling their own shadows. They project their denied darkness onto others. But when you've made peace with your shadow, you stop needing to do that. You've looked at your darkness and said, yes, this is part of me too. And that's when something inside you relaxes. You stop needing to be perfect. You stop performing for approval. You can finally just exist, fully human, messy and real. It's a huge relief. It feels like your whole system exhales after being tense for years. You realize you don't need to prove your worth anymore. You still care about your values. You still want to do what's right. But it's not about showing anyone that you're good. You simply are. If you can acknowledge your less flattering sides without shame or collapse, that's enormous progress. That's evidence of real integration. You've made peace with your own complexity. This acceptance doesn't mean giving in to every impulse or abandoning ethics. It means being conscious of all that you are, seeing clearly the full range of your humanity, and then making choices from awareness instead of repression. That's true freedom, the kind that comes from knowing yourself completely. When you know everything that's inside you, light and dark, then your actions are authentic, not reactive. That's individuation. And finally, life feels meaningful again. Meaning becomes the air you breathe. It's not necessarily about what you do, but how you experience what you do. There's a difference between living from the ego and living from the self. With a capital S, the ego is your conscious I, your identity, the part that builds careers, relationships, achievements. The self is something larger, the organizing center of your whole psyche, conscious and unconscious together. In the first half of life, it's normal to focus on ego development. You're creating your identity, building a career, forming relationships, finding a place in the world. Those things matter. But eventually, often around midlife, something shifts. You might reach the goals you once wanted so badly, the job, the home, the partner, and yet, something feels hollow. The achievements that once gave you satisfaction start to feel empty. That's what people call a midlife crisis. But really, it's not a crisis. It's an invitation from the self. It's saying, there's more. There's meaning beyond accomplishment. Let's go deeper. When you answer that call, when you begin the process of true inner growth, life starts to feel meaningful again. Even if nothing external changes, your inner experience transforms. Meaning can come through creativity, a sudden need to paint, write, or make music. It can come through service, a desire to help, to contribute, to do something that benefits others. It can come through spirituality, not necessarily religion, but a sense of connection to something greater than yourself. Sometimes meaning shows up simply in how you experience ordinary life: the light through a window, the laughter of someone you love, the taste of a meal, the sound of rain. You become more present, more open to beauty, more touched by small moments. You encounter what I called the numinous, experiences that point to something beyond the personal ego. They remind you that life has depth, mystery, and sacredness. And when you've healed, you're more open to these experiences because you're no longer closed off or guarded. You're not hiding behind layers of defense. You can finally feel. Healing doesn't mean life becomes easy. Pain doesn't vanish. But suffering itself takes on new meaning. It's no longer random chaos. It's part of growth, part of becoming whole. You begin to see your struggles as part of a larger story, one that's leading you toward deeper consciousness. Life stops feeling like something that happens to you and starts feeling like something you're participating in. You're not running from yourself anymore. You're living from your center. You're integrated. You're whole. And that, truly, is what healing looks like. You begin to notice what I like to call synchronicity, those meaningful coincidences that seem to link your inner world with the outer one. The moments when the right book lands in your hands exactly when you need it, when you meet the right person at just the right moment, when situations fall into place in a way that feels deeper than mere chance. Now, I wasn't being mystical about this. I wasn't saying the universe is magical or playing tricks. What I meant is that when you're aligned with your own psyche, when you're truly paying attention, you start to see the patterns of meaning that were always there, waiting for you to notice. You start to participate in your own life instead of just drifting through it. And this feeling of meaning, this sense that you're part of something bigger, is perhaps the deepest sign that real healing has taken place. Because you're no longer simply surviving, no longer just managing symptoms or avoiding pain. You're actually alive, engaged, present, connected. Life feels like it's unfolding with you, not happening to you. You stop being a passive observer or a victim of circumstance and become an active participant in your own story. This is what I meant when I spoke about individuation. It's not about being perfect, not about wiping away all suffering, but about becoming who you truly are, finding your own place in the larger pattern. It's about living with meaning and purpose that come from within you, rather than being shaped by outside expectations. If you've felt even a small shift in this direction, even inconsistently, that's huge. That's your psyche's way of saying you're on the right path, that the work is taking root, that you've healed far more than you give yourself credit for. Many people in the field of psychology, especially those who follow Carl Rogers or the wider personal development movement, would see this as what Rogers called the good life. Though my approach came from a different philosophical background, we both understood something similar, that psychological health isn't a fixed destination. It's not a final state you reach and stay in forever. It's about being fully involved in the ongoing process of becoming yourself. It's the quiet, steady transformation that happens deep inside. So here we are, looking at 7 quiet signs of healing that unfold gently, beneath conscious awareness. Let's go over them again because I want you to really feel this. I want you to see yourself in these signs. 1. You can be alone without feeling lonely. You've made peace with yourself. 2. Your old triggers don't control you anymore. The past has lost its grip. 3. You can hold paradox. You don't need everything to make simple, logical sense. 4. Other people's projections don't define you. You know who you are. 5. Your dreams have changed. Your unconscious mind is settling down. 6. You've accepted your shadow. You've stopped fighting yourself. 7. Life feels meaningful again. You sense connection with something greater than your own ego. Now, here's what I really want you to understand. These aren't accomplishments. These aren't trophies to chase. They're natural outcomes. byproducts of the individuation process. You can't force them. You can't will them into being through effort or positive thinking. They emerge naturally when you engage in the real work of turning inward, facing your shadows and integrating what you find there. And what's amazing is that much of this work happens without your conscious control. Your psyche has its own wisdom, its own drive toward wholeness. I called it the teleological nature of the psyche. It's always moving toward integration, whether you're aware of it or not. That's why people can heal without realizing it. The change happens on levels that your conscious mind can't always see, in dreams, in small shifts in behavior, in subtle ways you respond differently to yourself and others. Your conscious awareness is often the last part of you to notice what's been happening all along. So if you recognized yourself in even one of these signs, pause for a moment and honor that. Acknowledge it. Give yourself some credit. Appreciate how far you've already come. Because here's what usually happens. People heal in powerful, life-changing ways, but they never see it. They keep believing they're still broken, still not there yet, still unfinished. Meanwhile, the evidence of their transformation is all around them, in their relationships, in their emotional responses, in the way they handle challenges that would have crushed them before. Don't miss your own evolution. Don't be so focused on some distant goal that you fail to notice how far you've already traveled. This framework we explored today, these 7 subtle signs, they're not just my ideas. They come from decades of depth psychology, from countless studies in personal growth and human development. And though thinkers like Carl Rogers and others in the self-development field approached transformation from different directions, they ultimately arrived at the same understanding: these are the markers of real psychological health. So now that you know this, what comes next? What do you do with this understanding? First, stop underestimating yourself. Stop dismissing your progress or thinking you haven't done enough. Look back at who you were a few years ago. Compare that version of yourself to who you are now, not in terms of what you've achieved externally, but in how you handle life. Think about how you deal with emotions, how you respond to pain, how you treat yourself when no one's watching, how you connect with others, how you face uncertainty. If any of that has changed, that's growth, that's healing, that counts. Second, trust the process. Trust the natural intelligence of your psyche. You don't need to push or rush it. You don't have to know all the answers right now. The individuation process unfolds at its own rhythm, in its own time. Your role is simply to stay aware, to notice your patterns, to catch your projections, to make friends with your shadow, to listen to your dreams, to question your assumptions. That's the real work. The rest unfolds on its own. Third, be gentle with yourself. Healing doesn't move in straight lines. There will be setbacks. You'll have days when you feel like you're slipping backward, moments when old triggers come alive again, times when life feels confusing and you just want things to make sense. That's normal. That's being human. It doesn't erase your progress. It doesn't mean you failed. It simply means you're still growing, still unfolding, still becoming who you are. Fourth, share this awareness with others. One of the most powerful things you can do is help people recognize their own healing. When you see someone judging themselves for not being healed enough, gently point out their progress. Help them notice the shifts they've made, even the small ones. That's not just kindness. It's how we create a culture that understands what healing really looks like. It's how we start honoring the quiet, invisible work of becoming whole. And fifth, keep going. Because the truth is, individuation never really ends. There's no final point where you're done, no moment where you reach perfect wholeness and stop growing. You are always in process, always learning, always integrating new parts of yourself. And that's not a flaw. It's what makes life rich and alive. The goal isn't to finish. The goal is to stay engaged, to remain curious, to keep exploring the depths of your own mind. It's about living what I've called the examined life, the conscious, authentic life. So here's my invitation to you as we bring this to a close. Take a moment right now to reflect on which of these signs you've seen in your own life. Maybe it's just one. Maybe it's all 7. Maybe it's something close to these ideas but expressed in your own way. Whatever it is, acknowledge it. Let it sink in that you've been healing this whole time, that your psyche has been doing its quiet, intelligent work even when your conscious mind thought you were still broken. You're not as damaged as you think. You're not as far from wholeness as you imagine. You're not as stuck as it sometimes feels. You are growing, evolving, transforming. And if you take nothing else from this conversation, take this. Individuation isn't about becoming someone different. It's not about reaching an idealized version of yourself. It's about becoming more fully who you already are, with all your light and your darkness, your contradictions, your human complexity. That's what real healing looks like. Not perfection, not the erasure of pain, but wholeness, integration, and the courage to live as your full, authentic self. If you're walking that path, if you're doing that inner work, if you can see even the smallest traces of these signs in your life, then you're already further along than you realize. You've healed more than you know. And that's something worth celebrating. I want to hear from you, because this isn't just about my words. It's about you recognizing your own journey. So take a moment to reflect and share which of these 7 signs touched you the most. Which one made you pause and think, that's me. That's really happening. Was it finding peace in solitude, losing the pull of old triggers, learning to hold contradictions without fear? Tell me your story, because when you share it, 2 things happen. First, you make your own healing real. You bring it into awareness, you honor it. And second, you help someone else see that they're not alone, that change is possible, that healing is real. We need to talk about this more. We need to recognize transformation when it happens, to stop waiting for dramatic breakthroughs and start noticing the quiet shifts that change everything. So tell your story. Think about where healing has shown up in your life, even in small ways you might have overlooked. This is how we build a community of people doing the real work. Those who aren't satisfied with surface-level fixes, who are ready to understand themselves deeply. If that's you, you're exactly where you need to be. You're part of something meaningful. There's so much more ahead, so many insights to discover, so many layers of transformation already happening inside you. Your healing is real. Your growth matters, and you're precisely where you're meant to be right now, in this very moment.